Welcome back, guys. It is Game 3 between Lycomedes and Astamatitos. CALLOUS Invitational 3, Round 2, Upper Bracket. Let's get straight into it. Going to switch the sides. Lyco on the bottom for the third and final time. Asta on the top. Lead meta for Asta against lead Skarm from Lyco, which should immediately tell you one of two things. The most likely thing being, there's a Dugtrio in the back, since you are obvious Magneton fodder. The second possibility, far less likely, is that it is what they call the YOLO Skarm, which is a Skarm with a lot of speed and HP ground, specifically designed to bait, trap, and kill Magneton, which is very gimmicky. It's great against Magneton teams, which Asta does have, but in basically every other matchup, it is just a much worse version of what the standard Skarmory would be. And showing Toxic indicates that he doesn't have that. And he wouldn't have whirlwinded it either. He would have just killed it. So we're going to go back to Theory A, which is that there is a Dougie in the back for Lycomedes. Asta's shown 4 pokes already. Lyco's only shown 2. He goes to Skarm here as possible fodder. Asta does not let that happen. He goes to his Coon here, stepping on the one spike that Lyco did manage to get down. See what he wants to do from here. He's going to make a nice conservative switch back to Bliss, just in case Coon stays in or Mag comes in. Bliss would have been good either way. Surf 18%. That would have killed the Skarm from the HP that it's at, but obviously Blissey takes it just fine. Meta comes in on Spike. And he's going to eat a Thunderbolt here, 24%. Meta does have leftovers here. See what it wants to do. Swampert comes in. That's bad. Swampert comes in to boom there. Lyco not able to anticipate that. I don't know if that was Asta making a great prediction, if that was Asta getting lucky, or if that was a mistake from Lyco. Very well may have been a mistake. It was a slightly early boom for Asta. I think Lyco did that anticipating Meteor Mash, but it does not work out at all. And booming on Pert with your low Metagross is really, really good for Asta and really, really bad for Lyco. So even though it is a 5-5 game right now, you've got to think Asta's ahead, not only because that was a good trade for Asta, but also because the Skarmory for Lyco is very low. But granted, this might put Lyco ahead. He's going to switch Dougie in for free on Thunderbolt. That's an instant KO on Magneton, and all of a sudden Lyco is ahead 5-4, though the Skarm is still very low. And this looks to be, now that we have seen the Celebi, this looks to be a very similar, if not the exact same team that Asta used and won with in Game 1. If it is that team, then the last poke is Endeavor Pert, and Lycomedes should know that at this point. +1 Psychic takes out Skarm. That's going to even the game. Lyco does go straight for the Dougie, and he's obviously going to HP Bug here, so the question is, can Asta live? And the answer is no. So that is either an Adamant Dugtrio, I guess a Jolly Dug with a really good roll, or just not that bulky of a Celebi. But I suspect, given the Blissey and given the trend in which people have been using Adamant Dug in this tournament, I suspect that that was in fact Adamant. I know M-Dragon, among other players, is a big fan of the Adamant Dugtrio, especially when you pair it with Blissey, so the Dugtrio does not have to beat things like Raikou or Starmie that would dictate Jolly. So Asta here is trying to set up his Coon. He's at +2 at the moment. Make that +3. Blissey fishing for a crit with Thunderbolt that currently has not come. The non-crits becoming underwhelming here. 15%, not going to get it done, but a crit at any time could be devastating. And there is the rest turn. So looking at Lyco's team, it does not look like he has a phaser here. We can rule out Blissey and Dugtrio as phasers for sure. Gengar could have Boom, which would allow a Dougie follow-up, which would deal with this Coon. And then T-Tar, we've seen only Ice Beam. T-Tar does learn and does sometimes carry Roar, but it seems exceedingly unlikely that Roar and Ice Beam would be on the same set, so I think you can very safely rule that out. Those two moves are just not on the same T-Tar set. That would be an extremely odd and unlikely scenario. And Lyco here is just fishing for that crit. It's a Crocoon from Asta. We've seen Rest Talk already. Sleep Talks have not landed anything too relevant. He's going to wake up now, and he's going to go for the throat, so Blissey goes down. So now we're going to find out if it's Adamant Dugtrio, because Adamant would do it here, but Jolly would not. And the fact that he's making this switch, I think it's just got to be Adamant. Either that or he's just going to Earthquake, Kuhn will live, and then he'll follow up with Gengar. But he actually gets him from 49%, so that has got to be Adamant, Doug. And that leaves Lyco in a 3-2 advantage here. Mence is Choice Banded, and Dougie decides to stay in and go Earthquake. Rock Slide here, the play from Asta. That makes sense to me, just in case the Gengar came in. It would also do damage to Tar had he done that. Tar is at 76%, doesn't want to risk it. And Lyco is going to let the Dugtrio go, so it's going to come down to a 2-on-2 situation here. Here's Gengar. And wow, of note, the Sand is going to tell us that the Salamence is actually faster here. So this might be a jolly Choice Bander from Asta, whereas it might be a fatter, more conservative Gar at only 300 speed. But it's very relevant that the Salamence is faster in that one-on-one matchup. However, it doesn't look like Gengar has the right tools here. HP Grass would be amazing, as would Will-O-Wisp, as would Boom, but he doesn't seem to have any of those things. Goes back to T-Tar here, maybe thinking Mence is coming in. No! He switches it into a Surf and just dies, and now I think he's in big trouble. In fact, I think he's lost, because even if Gengar were to crit or freeze the Swampert to kill it here, we know that the Salamence is faster, so I think Lyco is dead either way here. As it turns out, he doesn't even beat the Swampert because Torrent kicks in at a great time, enabling the Surf to KO. But let's say, just for hypothetical sake, let's say the Gengar had Ice Punch crit the Swampert there and killed it. I think he still loses at that point because the Salamence comes in, it is faster, and it simply clicks Hidden Power Flying, and down goes the Gengar. So yeah, Lyco is going to butcher that late game a little bit. It felt like he was a little bit ahead at various points in this game, but he cannot close it out. Asta has the balls to bring the exact same team twice in one match. This is the exact same team that he won Game 1 with, and he's also going to win Game 3. So either he's really confident in this team just in general, or he thinks that it's a great choice against this player. And in either case, you could certainly argue that he was justified because both the games that he won were, in fact, with this team, though this one clearly could have gone either way, and I think Lyco could have made some different decisions in this late game that maybe would have given him a different result. Certainly there are some 50-50 turns and some weird things that could have happened either way, but I do not think in this late game situation that the game was unwinnable for Lyco. I think things definitely could have happened that would have generated a different result. But, as I say, shoulda, woulda, coulda does not matter in Pokemon. The bottom line is the result that actually happened, and that is a 2-1 series victory for Astamatitos, who will advance to the 2-0 winners bracket. Lyco is going to drop down to 1-1 and the lower bracket. Please rate, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the video and the series, and another really good set from the winners bracket is coming up next. I hope to see you guys there.